Hi Archers! In this video, I'll be guiding you through an all-new armor tier list for patch 1.4.4 onwards. I'll be ranking all the armor from worst to best, go through their pros and cons, and the damage numbers. My name is Teeds. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe and click the bell for more ARCHERO videos. A disclaimer, this is based on my research, my experience, and my opinion. You may not agree with me, and that's perfectly okay. Always adjust to your preference and most importantly, your playstyle. Tier lists may change depending on their rarity, the chapter you're on, hero you're using, and items you have equipped. There is no cookie cutter answer. With that, let's get into it. So before we get into the new general tier list for armor, let me first show you the old one so you know what has been changed. In my first tier list that I made back in July 2019, the armor was as ranked. In 4th place was Phantom Cloak, in 3rd place was Golden Chestplate, in 2nd place was Void Robe, and in 1st place was Vest of Dexterity. Let's get into the new one. This will be compared in their epic forms. Armors will have a base effect, a rare effect, and a unique epic effect. All armors have a rare effect of plus 20% extra healing from the red hearts. Coming in 4th place as the worst armor is Golden Chestplate. From our old tier list, moving from 3rd place to 4th place. Base stat, damage resistance plus 5%. Epic effect, deals flame damage to nearby enemies. The flame damage ticks 5 times per second and deals 10% of your base damage. Does not increase with weapon modifiers, abilities, or boosts. The pros, resists 5% damage to all types of enemies. The flame damage does help against melee enemies or enemies who are close to you, as they will take damage from your fire ticks. Cons, you have to be close to the enemy for the flame damage to kick in. I've placed Golden Chestplate last because while the stat is pretty great with 5% resistance to all sources, the epic effect is lacking. In 3rd place is the Void Robe, moving from 2nd place to 3rd place. Base stat, collision damage plus 10%. Epic effect, poisons all enemies in the room. The poison ticks once per second and deals 40% per tick of your base damage. Does not increase with weapon modifiers, abilities, or boosts. Pros, counters 10% damage from melee enemies, which becomes more valuable in later chapters. Poisons all monsters in the room automatically, no matter where they are. Best armor for damage for enemies in hard to reach places. Does the most damage overall out of all armor items. Best epic effect out of all epic effects for armor. Cons, collision damage, at least in the earlier chapters, is not the highest source of damage. I've placed Void Robe in 3rd place over Golden Chestplate, mainly because of the epic effect as I said earlier. While the epic effect is not the most important stat of the armor, Void Robe's epic effect has proved to be much more useful than Golden Chestplate. In terms of the rare stat, Golden Chestplate does have a better overall stat of plus 5% damage resistance to all sources over Void Robe's 10% collision damage resistance. While it is 5% less in collision damage, it is 5% more in range damage for Golden Chestplate. Despite that, Void Robe's epic stat is the strongest stat of all in the armor items and cannot be ignored. In 2nd place is the Phantom Cloak. Base stat, projectile resistance plus 10%. Epic stat, freezes enemies who hit you and deals thorn damage. The freeze lasts for 1.13 seconds. The freeze and damage will only proc on the enemy you take damage from. The damage deals 200% of your base damage, so basically double the damage. Does not increase with weapon modifiers, abilities, or boosts. Pros, it has better potential to save you from bad situations over the previous 2 armors. Takes out an enemy from the fight for a few seconds. Gives you an extra few hits against lone bosses. Freezes enemies and deals high single target damage. Projectile resistance is the most likely source of damage we struggle with in most cases. Most useful with bosses and certain enemies. Cons, super situational to use. For the pros to work, it requires you to take damage. Does the least damage overall in comparison to all armors. There is a bug and the freeze does not always proc, which means there is some unreliability to this armor. The freeze does less for those with weaker weapons. For example, the freeze gives you a 1.13 second window to attack the enemy. I'm on chapter 14 at the moment. I know there are some players with the same gear with me, which is Perfect Epic, who are on chapter 14, and I know that most of the players that I've seen that have completed chapter 14 have legendary weapons. I do not have a legendary weapon, so obviously I deal less damage. That 1.13 second window does more for a player with a legendary weapon over a player with, let's say, a rare weapon. This is only comparable if you're on the same chapter with different gear. but if I was on a lower chapter that's easier, obviously the enemies would be easier. So me taking damage and dealing damage, giving me that 1.13 second window, is less worth it for me over those who have better armor and weapons, because obviously the better armor you have, the more damage you can take and the less risk you're in. This armor is bad for enemies who are in sync. For example, in chapter 11 with the Medusa and Candle mobs that are in sync, freeze will put them out of sync if you get hit by one of them. A con in mob levels is that you may get hit from a ranged enemy and freeze that enemy but blocked off by melee enemies, so you can't even hit that enemy. The freeze will then be useless and you do not have the little extra damage like the other mobs that proc with nearby enemies or void robe with all enemies. You might be wondering why I place this in second place. It is a mixture of two things. There is a lot of cons. It honestly took me a while to figure out why players were favoring Phantom Cloak. It is a big jump from last place to second place. However, I placed it second because projectile resistance played a big part for me. While the epic stat is extremely situational, it is still decent. But let's say Void Robe had the projectile resistance instead of Phantom Cloak, then I personally would place Void Robe in second place over Phantom. So projectile resistance played a huge part for me in this placement. The biggest problem for me is that I find this gear better for those who have better gear in general than for those who do not. The item started emerging as one of the best because of chapters 13 and 14. I do find this great against bosses, and I have tried it against a tentacle mob in chapter 13, however I could not get behind the hype. It is definitely a counter, but it wouldn't make me place it first overall. I would say this is a situational second place, mainly here because a mixture of projectile resistance plus the epic effect. It can help you in tough situations, and it is a great counter against specific things you may struggle with. The epic stat is better than the epic stats of the previous two armors in boss chapters and boss levels. Void Robe is still better for mob levels overall, and Golden Chestplate's epic stat is just pretty bad. Phantom Cloak is very situational and very high risk, but it could save you from a high risk situation. While it does require you to take damage for the pros to work, it still has more pros than the previous two armors, and it highly depends on your playstyle as well. In first place is the Vest of Dexterity. Staying in first place. Base stat, dodge plus 7%. Epic stat, deals lightning splash damage to nearby enemies. Ticks once per second, dealing 80% of your base damage. Only one target is hit for the 80%. Any other target nearby you will be hit for 25%. This damage is affected by abilities and boosts, but not affected by the weapon modifier. Pros, chance to dodge a whole attack regardless of enemy type. While it does say 7% dodge chance, it's basically 7% chance to dodge a melee attack or a projectile attack. Great for all types of levels, both boss levels and mob levels. Avoids full damage attacks, which becomes really high as chapters and events scale. Cons, and this may be a very big con for some players, it is the most unreliable armor over previous armors because it is chance based. If you do not like to rely on chance, Vest is not for you, and I would say you should just ignore it. Because it is chance based, the other armors have the advantage of a base stat that is active all the time. I kept Vest of Dexterity in first place because I personally find it very strong. It is placed in first because of the dodge stat. If you don't like relying on chance, then I would say ignore Vest of Dexterity. There is an argument where some players have said that dodge is not good anymore because it is not additive. While that does make dodge not as good as we thought it was, it is still strong. Just because the calculations are less, it does not make it bad. I feel that some players are stuck on thinking about how great they thought it was and not for what it actually is. And if you just think about what it is, it's still fantastic. But remember, it is less reliable and it always has been. The cons have not changed, and that's what happens when you rely on chance. I value dodge a lot because when it does proc, it makes a huge difference. For example, let's say I have 10,000 health and I get hit around for 8,000 damage on a boss, which is how much I take from the daily events. The chance to avoid 8,000 damage is very much worth it to me over, let's say, the 10% projectile resistance. This means I would take 7,200 damage from a projectile. But once I get hit again, I have the chance to dodge it once again and still keep my 10,000 health, while the next hit with my projectile resistance is death. That is why I value dodge even though it is chance based. There is a counter argument as well, and that again is why chance is so unreliable. So same scenario, if I had 10,000 health and I get hit for around 8,000 damage, I would still get the projectile resistance and I may not get the dodge at all. This is why some players don't like chance. It is a gamble to rely on, and you could either be lucky or unlucky. It's all situational, and there really is no right answer. In the same scenario, if I could proc dodge at least once, that means I would die in 3 hits with dodge if I procced once at least, and I would die in 2 hits with projectile resistance. This is really up to you on what you want to rely on. Remember, this is just my opinion, my experience, and my research, and I don't expect everyone to agree with me. And just as a little extra, this is the damage of the armor. To have a better understanding of my placements, I will also show you the damage of each armor. Each armor has an epic stat that provides damage. This is with a base stat of 2038. In terms of damage per hit, Phantom Cloak is first, Vest of Dexterity is second, Golden Chestplate is third, and Void Robe is last. This is just the damage per hit. However, it is a very different story depending on how many targets there are in the room. If the armor was hitting 5 targets in one room, Golden Chestplate is first, Void Robe is second, Vest of Dexterity is third, and Phantom Cloak is last. While Phantom Cloak deals the most damage per hit, it does the least damage overall. By the time you can surpass the other armors in damage, your hero will probably be dead because to deal damage with Phantom Cloak, you have to take damage. Golden Chestplate and Vest of Dexterity is circumstantial because you do have to be close to the enemy for the damage to hit, so these numbers are not realistic. Even though Golden Chestplate has the highest damage per minute, you probably won't reach that. Void Robe has the most realistic number because it deals damage to all enemies within the room regardless of how close or far away you are from the enemy. Therefore, in terms of damage, Void Robe has the highest overall damage even though it has the least per hit damage. Let me know in the comments regardless of this tier list on what your favorite armor is. That is all for today's video. I thank you very much for watching. Subscribe and click the bell for more Archery videos. I hope to see you again for the next one. Bye!